Welcome to StoryFest 2025 at the Westport Library. Please be sure to pick up a copy of our program to find details about all of today's panels and events.
That's my friend Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian. All right. Oh, I guess we're ready to go. Yes. Okay. So, hello. My name is Sonya Huber. I'm very excited to moderate this discussion with some really amazing authors. So we will just first go down the row so everybody can introduce themselves. I'm Sonya. My latest book is Nothing Compares to You, What Sinead O'Connor Means to Us, and it's a bunch of different essayists on the work and life of Sinead O'Connor.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Tsui. I am the author of On Muscle, The Stuff That Moves Us and Why It Matters.
My name is Nabil Ayers. I'm the author of My Life in the Sunshine. We're all looking up at our book covers.
Hi, I'm Koren Shadmi. I'm the author and illustrator of All Tomorrow's Party, a biography of the Velvet Underground.
Hi, I'm Mariah Fredericks, and I'm the author of The Girl in the Green Dress, a historical mystery featuring Zelda Fitzgerald.
Awesome. So my first question is, also given the nature of the celebrations outside, I always find that nonfiction or writing about real people has some element of like anxiety, adrenaline. I kind of am not supposed to be doing this. So I was wondering if any of you would want to talk a little bit about what felt most rebellious in your book project.
I can jump into the rebellion question. Well, my book is a memoir. It's largely based on my father, the jazz musician Roy Ayers, who I never knew, who my mother had a relationship with and had me deliberately, with his consent, knowing that he'd never be part of our lives. So there wasn't a divorce, he didn't leave us, had a great life, and tried to connect with him in my 30s. I'm 53 now, and that was great, but that was it. It was one lunch, never happened again. So when I started writing about him, he was still alive. He just passed away in March, and I never reconnected with him. But it was interesting and a weird, sometimes difficult, sometimes really fun exercise to try to write about someone who's my father, who lives in the same city, who's alive, but who I don't know, who I had one long lunch with that was really incredible, and then several blips as a kid, like really quick meetings that I remember really well. And so it almost felt like a game where how I started writing, I wasn't trying to write a book, I was just writing. Because I was writing for fun, and my wife said, you need to write about your father. So I started to. And I just thought like, okay, well, there's that one time I met him when I was 8, and I remember it, and I remember what it smelled like in the room and all these things. There was that other time when I was 14 or whatever, and just had these like little, it was very visual to me. There was little stories, and I was trying to connect something. But I guess maybe the rebellious part was sort of being angry, but trying to not write an angry book and trying to still think about the positive things I got from him while getting into the negative things as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
I wanted to respond to that a little bit too, because my book On Muscle Genesis was my relationship with my dad, who is a artist and a martial artist, and kind of brought us up in his downstairs studio to be his little ninjas, as he called us. And anyone who knows me knows this about me, and sort of like when it came time to talk about, oh, what is the next book after this book about swimming you've written, this relationship to the body and movement. And Nabil and I were talking a little earlier about, like, doesn't it always kind of come back in some way to our family, absence or presence? Like, and in my case, it's the very, very present presence of my dad in my childhood, and then his departure in my adult life. So I just think it does feel rebellious to write about those stories in some ways, because it is, you give yourself permission to write them.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's you're basically, once you're writing about nonfiction about people you don't know. In my case, then you're like thinking, well, who gave me permission to write about this person who's very well known? And I'd done my research as much as I could, but in the case of comics, I also have to invent dialogues that never happened. So you have to give yourself even extra permission to just say, like, well, what do I assume that these people said at this time to each other? I know what happened, but I don't know the conversation they had. So you have to kind of trust yourself and be like, okay, this is, kind of a biopic. I'm coming up with a drama that drives the plot forward, and just, not worry too much about that.
Yeah, I think the tricky thing is when you're writing about people well enough known to be of interest to readers, is dealing with the mythology around those people, and to some degree serving the mythology. But also, when you do research, you find out things that contradict the official story. With Scott and Zelda, for example, this fabled love story. And it was, but it looked very different than people would find them at parties in the bedroom fast asleep. And that's not what you imagine them doing. And dealing with the less pleasant side of their character, which I think often tells you a lot about them and what they were reacting to in the era. And just having the faith that you are serving them better by presenting them as closer to what the historical record were, rather than the jazz baby mythology.
Right. Awesome. I mean, that does get into a sort of a big obsession of mine, which is research, and how you manage both, in both of your cases, probably like, I don't know, I would imagine a lot of information versus you all were both sort of writing into an absence. So I was wondering if you could each talk about like what the research is like, if you had to do any, and then, how you managed it, any surprises you found as you were delving into the record of each of your focuses.
Well, with Zelda, there's no lack of material. And the wonderful thing about a mystery is it's a very condensed time period, so you don't have to account for the entire human being. But the biographies, and the letters that she wrote, which show an interesting evolving voice, and you try and create a persona that will feel right for all of those voices. Her letters to Scott when they're first courting are very languorous and flirtatious and, badly behaved. And then she comes to New York and she's like, adopting that pert, sharp tone. And I always find finding the voice is really key to a character.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, I think research is maybe the most fun part for me, because it's almost like you're playing detective and you're reading any biography that's available, and then some say this thing happened and some say that thing happened, and you kind of have to decide for yourself what's the truer. For instance, when I did a biography about Rod Serling, he wrote the original Planet of the Apes book, the Planet of the Apes movie from the 60s, and there was some debate if he's the one that actually wrote the ending or not. And so some people he claimed that he wrote the ending, which is, I'm not going to ruin it for whoever hasn't seen the ending of Planet of the Apes, but he claimed that he wrote it, and then some other people claimed no, he didn't. And all you have to do is watch all these episodes of The Twilight Zone and see that his whole, one of his shticks was a twist ending. So it's like, how could it not be his ending? It is the biggest twist ending ever. So you sometimes you have to make decisions, and then sometimes someone might, like later when the book comes out, be like, well, I think otherwise. But as long as you don't find any concrete proof that one or the other, you sometimes have to make a call. And then the other, I guess, really tricky part about research is that you need to know when to stop, because like otherwise, you know, especially when it's like a really well-covered, figure with a lot of biographies, you can end up reading for a year and then like you're just oversaturated with information and you're like, this is too much. So you got to get to this point of like you're satiated, is that the word? And you're like kind of full and you're like, okay, I'm ready to start writing. I have enough.
Awesome.
I love finding those great little details that make you sit up, though, where you're like, oh, that's the animating thing around that person, and that's what's going to bring them to life. And it's both like what's scenic behind the, that's actually the setup for what's the context of this person doing this thing, like running 50 miles across a desert, and what does that feel like, sound like, look like, and then have that float to the top, I think is always like the funnest part of doing that.
That's awesome.
I had a pretty interesting research process in that I did do a lot of research. I would say it was more sort of emotional research than factual, because my father's a musician who has lots of albums that I knew, and a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I'd seen sort of the main few things, but I'd never done like the deep dive. And I think also while I was writing the book, probably more and more of this stuff was starting to appear. So I watched a lot of live videos and interviews and things from over the years, and I don't know if I had a purpose. It was really just, while writing the book, I was trying to connect with him in a way, and one way to do that was to watch his physicality and see how that changed over the years, or see how his voice changed over the years, or how his hairline changed. Like, this was actually a weird way of getting close enough to him to feel like I could write like I knew what I was talking about,
That's amazing. And there's one thing that I noticed in each of your work, like the specific thing you talked about of like capturing physicality with a few certain gestures. And like for Lou Reed, it was sometimes even like the angle at which you were drawing him. I just found it so striking. So I was wondering, you could sort of, as a writer, go on generating those details endlessly. And Nabil, you did the hairline, but also his smile, right? And so I was wondering if each of you could talk a little bit about that specific process of, and especially it's interesting in the cases of probably yours, especially your dad, like not having much material to go on. So how did you generate a physical presence for these characters?
I think you really have to, for me, it's like because my father was so present in my childhood, I had to really kind of think about when I felt closest to him, and then put myself in to inhabit those moments and kind of really remember what, again, because the book is about physicality, is about inhabiting these physical bodies we have, and also what it means to do that, what it means to move in concert with someone. Like, it's really a beautiful, profound internal, like a connective relationship, but also like, what does it mean to be in front of all of you and together with you in this space versus like on the phone, like letters, like a sort of asynchronous being. And certainly I started writing it in the middle of the pandemic, so I had a lot of time to think about what is the difference with the relationship between people who are right in front of you versus not there.
Right, and like all the sense memories from your childhood, right?
And it really was so interesting, and it helped me, I think, to appreciate how profound that is when we get to be in front of each other and moving together and doing these physical things together.
Wow,
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for me, the physicality, it's interesting. I think that's where the absence comes in for me, where a lot of my book is, and a lot of my life is sort of me figuring out pieces of my father without him being there, but from people who knew him or people who were around him a lot. About 2/3 into the book, I did 23andMe, and that's sort of a big turning point that connected me with lots of cousins and my father's sister, my aunt who I'd never met, who I didn't know was alive.
Right.
And the physicality stuff started to come in when, I remember very well, we have an incredible picture of it, the first time I met her and the way she looked at me. And it was like, oh, wow, this is, not only do we look alike, and not only is this undeniably like you could be my mother, it's my father's sister, but just the way she looked at me was so intense and so obvious, like, and confirming, lots of things that I sort of needed. And there's lots of that as I was meeting all these people. Same thing with my cousins who also look and act like me, just like these looks of instant connection and acceptance that were pretty intense and pretty great. And tons of fun to write about. I loved writing about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, as I was working on the book, I realized more and more that I wouldn't want to hang out with Lou Reed, and because he probably wouldn't want to hang out with me, and it's just like when you grow and you grow to know the character more, you kind of realize that they're more complex, and in his case, just like a very, very fraught personality, that kind of his whole thing was to antagonize literally everyone. And living in New York, you hear from other people like, oh, I ran into Lou Reed and this happened, or I ran into Lou Reed and this happened. And it's all like, I can't confirm any of these, but most of them were just like horrific, stories. And so I did get to meet John Cale one time, and he was very nice, and it was like kind of a chance encounter. And so, and just from our little conversation, I got the vibe that he's like a really nice guy. With Lou Reed, I was going to Film Forum to see a movie, and I got there way too early, and I see this like old man that looks like he's dressed in like a hobo, and was wearing like these tattered Uggs, and I asked the usher, I was like, that guy looks like Lou Reed, and she's like, that is Lou Reed, he's here all the time, he comes really early so no one bothers him and goes into the theater. And I was like, wow. So and that was before I wrote the book. And so you kind of, you're in it already, you've committed to do the book, and you're realizing, oh, this guy's a little, this definitely has like a rough side to him, to say the least, but I'm already in here, I'm gonna kind of play it up and just show the world like, he was a complicated guy, and you have to also explain why was he a complicated guy? And you see that, he had all these issues growing up, and like came up with like, had electroshock treatment as he was like a teenager, and really things that further antagonized him and caused him trauma. And you kind of learn to understand. You're like, okay, this is where it's coming from. Wow. So you have to kind of have compassion and not just say, oh, look, this guy's a jerk. You're like, well, why,
Yeah.
Well, I did not run into Zelda. I have a theater, sadly. But yeah, physicality with her is an interesting issue because, of course, so many of the memories that you have of her is a lot of people who knew Scott, who were men, responding to, wow, she's beautiful and sexy, and then certain women going, I don't think she's so hot. So that's one element that you have to deal with. And then there's how did she view her body? Because she was an intensely, she was an athlete. She loved to swim. She loved to dance. She was a strong person. So it's sort of an interesting vision of her reclaiming a certain kind of autonomy physically. Like, I'm not just what you're responding to. The famous shot of them where she's very made up and her hair is marceled. She's like, yeah, that's my Elizabeth Arden look. And there's one clip of her, or supposedly of her, I don't know if it actually is her, where it's a young woman, very excited, sort of, you feel the energy. She's just standing, but she's kind of pogoing. And I thought, yeah, I don't know if that actually is Zelda, but that's going to be my vision of how she felt in her body.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. So this is a question just based from my own writing experience. So at any book I've ever written, there's a certain point at which I'm just sickened and like, oh, what have I done? This is not gonna work. Like, I can't figure out how to put this book together. I can't figure out how to tell this story, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have just one, I have many of them, but I'd love to know if any of you had that moment, or maybe more than one moment, where you were like, what have I gotten myself into?
I love talking about this book as a heavy lift because it totally was. And I feel like if you're writing a book
Play on your title.
yeah, you're writing a book about muscle, it should feel hard, right? Like it's like, and also it's life. Like muscle is life, movement is life. It is the resisting of the thing and also finding the flow through the thing and stretching towards, you know, past your limits, enduring, like all of those themes. And what I love about muscle is that it lends itself to all of these phrases and metaphors, and like our language gives us away, right? Like we talk about gritting through things, muscling through them. You know, it's a stretch. Like even when you tell someone to relax, it is a bodily state of being, and it's like your whole self. And so actually, I feel like that all of that stuff wrote itself, and really wonderful ways infiltrated the themes of the book, not just about what muscle can do for us and all the stories we tell about people who do amazing things, but also what it means to endure, like through hard things.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Awesome.
I never had an ending for my book. And that always, even once I'd sold it, once I was maybe in the second draft with my editor, it was still kind of, there was like sort of a placeholder ending that I always thought like, oh, you know, and we'll figure this out. And it started to get to the point where I was like, I don't know what to do, and I'm not sure if this can exist. It has to have an actual ending, but so much stuff was still happening in real time. Me meeting people, me connecting with people, all these things are happening. So without giving it away for people who haven't read it, something rather seismic happened, like really close to when the final draft was due. And I was like sort of shaken and sort of called my editor and said, it happened. We need to change a bunch of things. And I'm really happy with how it turned out in real life and with the book. But there's definitely, as it got closer, there was a time where I really felt like, well, I don't know what's gonna happen. Maybe this never gets done if there's not an ending. But it came, and I think that was also part of what my book felt like, was something was happening in real time, and that was very exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah, I had, when I pitched the idea for the book, there was no actual Velvet Underground biography that in existence. So I was like, is there even a story here? Like, I think there is. Like, I was reading things, and I didn't really get that in depth of it. But I pitched it to my publisher, and they're like, sure, you go ahead, do it. And then, like, as I was working on it, originally the idea behind, I thought that the way I would structure the story is that the band's doubts about themselves, and could we have done it without Andy Warhol? Because they became so famous once, you know, or Andy Warhol kind of put them as his like house band, and then like eventually that was also the reason that they kind of left or kind of had a rift with him, mostly Lou Reed. But then the story kind of morphed into the contentious relationship between Lou Reed and John Cale. And so I kind of had a general idea. I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff there, but when I pitched it, I didn't really know the driving mechanism of the story. And that came when I read more and more, because there was just like so much clash, and, you know, so much of that led to the music being so great. And so I was like, this is what I was gonna focus on.
Well, the standard wisdom in mystery is when you get stuck, you just kill somebody else. And I did sort of do that with this book, but the biggest crisis I had was, you know, the bookend events of the book are the death of New Yorker writer Morris Marty, who was found in his home, shot through the head, and that very year he had written an article about a man who was found in his home 30 years ago, shot through the head. And I thought, oh, how interesting, a crime writer dies the same way as his subject. So I went into, I felt I knew what had killed Morris Marty. I was like, he was a veteran, he was an alcoholic, this is pointing towards suicide. And he was friends with James M. Cain, who wrote a letter telling a mutual friend, here's what I think happened to Morris. So I went down to the Library of Congress and I read that letter, and it was completely different from the book I had written, both thematically, and I thought, whoa, I am totally stuck now, because he thought somebody in the household did it, which is its own story. So I had to do a deep dive into Marty's own writing, and I think I found the solution, but that was a bad twist. And yeah, I wrote several versions of the end that really didn't work, trying to shoehorn it into that reality, so.
Oh my gosh, I was wondering about that. So Marky's a real person.
Yep.
Oh
yep.
my gosh.
Yep.
And it has to be one of the only books that's like, the person solving the crime is dead, but you also don't know how he died. Like that was an amazing little.
Thank you.
So, and I also have questions for each of you. So how did you find all of the information about Lou Reed's early life? Was that also pretty publicized, or?
Yeah, there's a guy named Richard Bachrus who was like kind of their biographer, Lou Reed's biographer. So there was there were several biographies about Lou Reed. So that was in existence. There was just no story of the whole band as a whole. And that actually came out like a year after I did my book, or maybe even 2 biographies of the band.
Oh, wow.
But there was there's like a glut of information about him. And yeah, it was very fascinating finding out about his childhood, and it was based on interviews with his sister and family and things like that. And so it's all based on that. And actually, also there was another biography that came out also after my book, which I'm curious to read, but got very good reviews. I think like it's called maybe King of New York or something like that, like with a yellow cover. And but yeah, it's fascinating. And now every time we go drive in Long Island, we pass by Creedmoor Hospital, which is where Lou Reed got electroshock treatment. And then I tell my wife, this is where you got electroshock treatment. And still working, you know, people are still there, you know. But yeah, it was you know, taking that deep dive and then deciding there was just so much material, and like, what do I want to show out of that, and really keep it concise.
That's awesome. Nabil, has anything else come out recently since the book about your father?
Not that I know of, and he passed away in March. There are lots of sort of short obituary type things, but nothing big or long. Yeah, I'm sort of working on something, but I'm not sure what'll happen with it. It's more of a less personal, more about his biggest song and album, Everybody Loves the Sunshine, turning 50 in May of next year. And I always have this underlying sort of fear in a weird way that his legacy hasn't been taken care of, and that no one's going to care about that. And so maybe I should, because I know everyone who played on it now and know all the stories and have all the info. So working on that.
So yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you. Do you feel sort of a sense of a need to share the legacy, share more about his life, since you've become the expert and heir apparent, right? Yeah,
but I mean, not officially the heir apparent. There's still his real family, that I call it. He has a wife and 2 kids who grew up with him, who are 2 and 4 years younger than me, who I have no contact with, who I've heard from many people are not into me or this book.
Oh, really?
So it's a weird space to exist in. So, and I don't want to be I've kept track of everyone I've met. I've written a ton, and maybe someday I'll write a follow-up to this, but I don't think it's going to come soon, because I just don't want to be the person that's still doing that.
Yeah.
But there is something about the song and the album turning 50 that I feel that I need to be involved in.
Yeah.
But that'll be a shorter piece. That's not a book. That'll be like an article.
Right. And Bonnie, do you feel like you're done with the sort of huge topic of muscle? Are you going to move on to a different element of the body?
That is a great question. I don't know what the next thing is yet, but I'm thinking about it. I think it has been really fun to kind of continue the conversation of the body, like the last 2 books, really, especially with Why We Swim and On Muscle. But then the book before Why We Swim was American Chinatown, and that was like, my family history through all the Chinatowns, but also like the larger history of American, immigration from China. And so I think if you see anything thematically across those books, it's the blend of the journalism. I am a journalist. I'm a working journalist. That's what I do. And books are kind of becoming more and more of the thing that I do. But it is the merging of the the generalist journalist in me, the curiosity, I just want to follow it. And then and then also, as a journalist, you are a person. You have things happen to you. And I think in nonfiction writing, and especially in books in recent years, like, there is more fluidity and an allowance for the journalist to acknowledge, I am a human observing all of these things that are happening. I'm not an objective observer. And I think there is more power in the work because of that, because it acknowledges that humanity and connection between people. At least I feel that way, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. I guess, related to that, one of my other questions is, so there's a range of how the narrator plays into each of your work, from almost nothing, but you're sort of, in a way, maybe Marky is your version of yourself in the book. How did you each decide to position yourself in regard to the story? Like, Nabil, yours is very much, the mystery is almost inside you, right? So I'd love to hear you talk about, like, how you decided, or any of you decided, to put yourself in the center of the story, at the edges, or not appearing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, but it obviously had to be me telling it, because it was me telling my story, but me not knowing everything about my story was the weirdest part of it. So I'm telling this story, and I'm sometimes wondering what happened, or imagining what happened, or sometimes, I learned so much from my mother, who I've always been close with, and knew a lot about why I exist and how I came to exist, but she has this incredible memory and was giving me details of what she was wearing the night she got pregnant, and really, the details I got. So that was, so it was interesting to, I guess, maybe to realize I was more the center than I even thought I was once I started digging, and whether that was on YouTube and connecting with my father in that way, or whether that was in person with my mother and learning what she wore that night, all of this stuff it made me feel and exist much closer to the story than I actually realized I was.
And you also, like, sort of like the through line is a very emotional sense of connection, disconnection. That feels like the core of the book in many ways.
Right, yeah, and sometimes it was just realizing, oh, I'll never know that. Yeah. And that's as far as that piece goes.
Yeah. Any of the rest of you senses of like your book, I think maybe the Film Forum moment is one of the only times that you're there as a narrator?
Yeah, I mean, that's in the afterword, and in these graphic novel biographies, I try to be kind of like a fly on the wall, and so, I know I had a friend who would like insert himself really small in the illustrations for fun, but I'm not gonna Hitchcock it, yeah. And so I really am like just a fly on the wall, and I try to keep my voice like really neutral. With other books, like with the book I did about Rod Serling, the idea was that he narrates his own life story because he was the narrator of the presenter of the Twilight Zone. So I really I listened to I kept listening to his speeches, and he's like a public speaker later in life, and to all the Twilight Zone episode, and I tried to capture his voice, and there's all these words that maybe are like dated, but I use them, like Johnny come lately, or like he's in a predicament, and like all these like Twilight Zone, and I was like, I gotta put these words in, those are Rod Serling's words. And so he was an excellent writer, and so in that case it did feel like, wow, I'm getting into really big shoes here, but people seemed to enjoy it, and there was no they got that I'm trying to, I'm making my own impersonation, essentially.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's definitely an actor component to this exercise. I mean, I'm sure even for the two of you, you're presenting a particular side of yourself as a character. And I mean, if there's a through line of me in my books, I tend to write about the person who stands off to the side, the overlooked person. And it's, you know, the nanny, the Lindbergh nanny. It's, you know, Edith Wharton, but she's a middle-aged woman in book crisis at that point. And Marky is a Southerner in New York who has not made it, and that's why the book opens with him at that hellish party where he's sort of sidling along the walls trying to break into a conversation.
Really cool.
So often I like to write about people who they see what's happening in history, they see the moment. Zelda embodies that moment, but Marky's like, totally into it, really there, just don't know if I can quite, if I'm not cool enough to quite get into the zeitgeist at the moment.
Oh,
so,
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So what has been the most fun in terms of reactions you've gotten from the book? Most fun, most alarming, most whatever?
I love when people tell me that they are in the gym lifting weights while listening to my book.
Oh, that's amazing.
I mean, that's like also that it was the first book that I wrote that I actually narrated the audiobook
Oh, cool.
to, so I tell people, I'll read it to you. My mom asked me, and I said, I'll read it to you, Mom. But that I loved that some people were actually doing that, and they felt like that there was like a motivation. Well, I think, you know, because the book is, you know, a multidisciplinary look at muscle, but it's also really like storytelling. It's like great stories about people doing both ordinary and extraordinary things, and you know, science and culture and history and like literary stuff around that, art. And I want it to be a book that is something that people can find something for themselves in it, because I want people to understand that muscle and their body is like, it's for everyone.
Right, like you're actually, the reader is very included in a very physical way.
In ways that you would never have understood or realized given what society tells you.
Yeah, awesome.
I mean, I sort of hoped and planned on meeting a lot more people as a result of my books. My father was relatively famous and traveled the world for decades, and so my hope was I would meet people connected to him and meet more relatives, and it's just been crazy, and it doesn't stop.
Really?
And I love
Oh, wow.
it. And so, I mean, the biggest one is that I have a half-sister in London who, same as when I met my father, like same connection. We look alike, we laugh alike.
That's not Ebony.
Really wild. What's that?
That's not Ebony, it's someone else.
No, this is post-book. This is as a result of the book. That's been incredible, and we talk and hang out all the time. I go there for work, and that's amazing. But then just like the weirdest, smallest things. I was just telling Bonnie this story. There's a woman in New York who reached out a few weeks ago. She's like, I sort of heard this story and ended up reading your book, and I used to own a print shop on the Upper West Side in the 90s, and your father used to come in to have like flyers and CD booklets and things made. And I was like, great, let's have coffee, because that's always my response to anyone who does anything. And we did, and she was just telling me all these interesting stories, how for about a decade he would come in and what he was like and his physicality and all the kind of confirming everything I knew. And then she said, do you want to come up to my apartment and see the file? And I was like, what? And she'd kept this like, 2-inch thick file, every receipt handwritten, like, move the font lower, like just the weirdest sort of strange look into my father, which was just such an interesting thing to be able to see. And so these things just keep happening, and I love it.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't have any dramatic, fun stories. I just have people write to me and they're like, I saw the Velvet Underground, in the 60s, and this, when, you talk about this specific show, I saw them in Boston when they were kind of in exile from New York, and so things like that where people had enjoyed the book and let me know that they have some sort of kind of connection with them, which is really always really great to see and to read.
Awesome.
Yeah, mine fall into the category of people don't say it sucks, which was a huge relief, because the 20s really frightened me. I had never written in the 20s, and it's not an era that I have a natural feel for. Like, it's a happy era. I'm a 1910s kind of gal, or Depression, that's good. So I was very nervous, and then doing it in the life of somebody who is so well known, so admired. So I've been gratified that so far people have said, oh, the 20s is really well evoked. And I'm like, oh, good, phew. And people so far seem to like Zelda. I joined a writers group for the first time ever in my career. And I said, you have one job, and that is don't let me turn her into a manic pixie dream girl. Like, I don't want her to be cheesy and, like, so my book group seems to have done a good job with that.
That's awesome. Yay.
Did anyone tell either of you that you got it wrong or that you messed something up or details?
Yeah. Really?
I'm curious about that. That's,
Did you? Oh, I'd
to
love
jump
to
on
hear
the
about that from each of you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with my Bela Lugosi book, there was some guy who was trolling me on Instagram and said, like, this happened in this year, and this, like, it was pretty minor things, but he was also told me that he was planning to do a Bela Lugosi graphic novel, and I think he was, like, kind of annoyed.
The truth came out.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I've had some people who wanted the portrait of Zelda to lean more heavily into the tragedy, more heavily into the mental illness. But I'm like, she is 20, and everybody is having a good time, and random behavior just looks random. But when I wrote the Lindbergh Nanny, and I was actually surprised at how generous most people were, but I had one person come after me going, no, obviously he killed the baby, and here's why, and don't buy this book. I was like,
Wow.
It's a novel.
Wow.
that's my only question.
How about you guys? Did you have anybody come after you?
Not yet.
Oh, awesome.
Just wait.
So I imagine there are some nonfiction writers in the audience. So what advice do you have for other folks who are trying to tackle a portrait of someone else?
I mean, the only book I read about writing it's Mary Carr's The Art of the Memoir. Is that what it's called? Which I loved. And there were two things. There's one that if you're not 35, don't write about yourself, which didn't apply to me. But the other one that I really thought about a lot was that if you write about anyone, you should write about them with love. Which was an interesting way to look at it, because, I mean, I was writing about my father, who I was largely angry with.
Right.
But always tried to still think of that as kind of the through line, and it made it, I don't know, maybe like mentally or emotionally possible for me to write what still felt very honest and true, but without sounding bitter and angry, and still writing something positive, which is what I wanted to do.
And there's also that interesting, like the title, My Life in the Sunshine, it adds a layer of commentary that kind of does a lot of that work, right?
Right, yeah, my great life. That's kind of what it's, yeah. And it's a lyric from his song. That's the thing. And my friend said, oh, you stole your father's book title before he wrote it, but he never did.
How about the rest of you? Any advice for writers?
I love that idea of writing from a place of love. Like, I mean, whatever it is, whoever you're writing about, whatever the topic is too, like, and you're always gonna pull up characters, you're always gonna tell stories about them. The narrative about them. I think to do that with care.
Yeah.
I feel like as a journalist, that's always what I want to do, is to come from a place of care and listen first. And whatever the character, your fictional character who you're drawing from life, or is it a person you're observing and spending time with, and then kind of running that experience through yourself, and then figuring out what you want to say about it. But that is like, it's your responsibility.
Right, right. Yeah, there is that big, heavy responsibility.
Yeah, I would say, elaborate on the idea of love, that I would say that write from using empathy. So even if someone is like, a very complicated, thorny character, you need to try and understand what's the reason they're like that, and that will make your story fuller and more human, because no one's ever, is born a monster, like that's usually something that comes out through nurture, and then the more you understand, the more you do your research into the background and why is this happening, the better your character will come alive because you understand them better.
And with your book specifically, I mean, did you feel at the end like you understood what made Lou Reed tick?
Yeah, not fully, no. I mean, I think there's two enigmas in the book, which are Lou Reed and Andy Warhol. And I think maybe it's Lou Reed that says, like, I can usually figure out everybody, but I can't figure this guy out. And Lou Reed's a little bit the same, but I see where he's coming from, but like the level of like, you know, him battling with everybody and everything around him, I kind of partially understand, but I could never fully understand because I wasn't there, yeah.
Right. How about you?
Yeah, because I agree so strongly with coming from a point of empathy, but it's also a challenge when you're dealing with people who have done awful things. I found that with writing about Charles Lindbergh, I was coming from a place of you are going through an awful experience. On the other hand, I felt an obligation to be real about who he was. My agent never referred to him without using an expletive, and I didn't want to walk away from the pain he had caused other people. And it's a very tricky, as you guys all know, line to walk between not coming at it with judgment but being truthful. And I imagine with Lou Reed,
I would love, how about the rest of you? Have you, I mean, because you really all, to different degrees, are also presenting like, here's what was hard about my connection to that person or about Lou's connection to other people. Did you have more information about that you decided to hold back in any situation?
A ton. I mean, you know, there's a lot, and you don't want to be like, you know, sometimes you read biographies and you're like, wow, this person's really going strong into like describing everything sensational and negative.
Yeah.
And you don't want your book to be just like an attack on someone. So you pick and choose, and but there was like a lot of anecdotes that didn't make it, yeah.
Just through sheer volume.
Yeah, sheer volume, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a ton that didn't make it, and I think it probably is some of the sort of, I don't know, unjustified or unwarranted angrier stuff, more just like that felt like maybe I was lashing out and was an important part of the writing process, but wasn't an important part of the body of work that needed to be presented. It wasn't even, oh, I shouldn't put this in, that's gonna make someone mad, more just like, this doesn't sound like the me I want this to be, and it doesn't help the story.
Interesting. Anything you decided to leave out, Bonnie?
My mind is a blank right now. Ask me later.
All right, well, the monitor has turned orange, which is my signal. So thank you all. It was really wonderful to talk with you about your projects.
Thank you.
And these folks will be signing books back that way. If you want to get any of them, I've read them. They're all amazing. So check them out. Thanks.